It was a cold, moonless night when Emma decided to take the shortcut through the woods. She had heard countless warnings from the townsfolk about the dangers lurking within the forest, but she was running late. Her grandmother's cottage was just on the other side, and the shortcut would save her at least 30 minutes. The path started innocuously enough, with the tall ancient trees lining either side like silent sentinels. The air was thick with the scent of pine and the sound of nocturnal creatures stirring in the underbrush. Emma pulled her coat tighter around her and quickened her pace. Halfway through the forest, the path began to narrow. The trees closed in, their gnarled branches forming a twisted canopy overhead, blocking out what little light the stars provided. Emma's footsteps crunched on the dead leaves, a lonely sound that echoed in the oppressive silence. Suddenly, she heard a rustling noise behind her. She stopped and turned, peering into the darkness, but saw nothing. Dismissing it as an animal, she continued on, but the feeling of being watched lingered, prickling the hairs on the back of her neck. The deeper Emma ventured, the more the forest seemed to change. The trees, once stately and grand, now appeared misshapen and grotesque, their trunks twisted as if in pain. Shadows seemed to dance and shift just beyond the edge of her vision, and the air grew colder, more suffocating. As she pressed on, a low, haunting whisper began to drift through the trees. It was barely audible at first, like the wind murmuring through the branches, but it grew louder and more insistent. Emma paused, her heart pounding. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakably malevolent. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling. The whispering stopped abruptly, replaced by an eerie silence. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw movement. A shadow detached itself from the trees and glided towards her. Panic surged through Emma. She turned and ran, the path a blur beneath her feet. The whispers resumed, louder now, filled with anger and malice. The shadow was following her, gaining ground with every step. Desperate, Emma veered off the path, plunging deeper into the forest. Branches clawed at her clothes and hair, but she didn't slow down. She stumbled through the undergrowth, her only thought to escape the pursuing darkness. Eventually, she burst into a small clearing. In the center stood an old, dilapidated cabin, its windows dark and its door hanging off its hinges. Emma hesitated for only a moment before racing towards it. She pushed the door open and slammed it shut behind her, her hands shaking. Inside, the cabin was cold and musty. Moonlight filtered through the broken windows, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Emma leaned against the door, trying to catch her breath. Outside, the whispers grew louder, circling the cabin like a pack of hungry wolves. Emma scanned the room, her eyes landing on a dusty old book lying on a table. She approached it, drawn by a strange compulsion. The cover was worn and faded, but she could make out the title, The Forgotten Path. Curiosity and dread mingled in her chest as she opened the book. The pages were filled with stories of people who had ventured into the forest and never returned. Each tale was more horrifying than the last, detailing encounters with malevolent spirits, vengeful ghosts, and ancient curses. As she read, the whispers outside grew louder, more insistent. Emma realized with mounting horror that the book was not just a collection of stories. It was a warning. The forest was cursed, a place where the souls of the lost wandered forever, driven mad by their inability to escape. A sudden, bone-chilling cold swept through the cabin. Emma looked up, her breath visible in the frigid air. The shadows in the room seemed to coalesce, taking on a more defined shape. The whispers became a cacophony, a chorus of voices filled with rage and sorrow. Emma backed away from the table, her heart pounding. The shadows moved closer, their forms twisting and writhing. She could see faces now, their eyes hollow and their mouths twisted in silent screams. "No," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "This can't be happening." The shadows surged forward, enveloping her in darkness. Emma screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the night. She felt a cold hand grasp her arm, then another, pulling her down into the black abyss. When the townsfolk searched the forest the next day, they found no trace of Emma. Her grandmother, frantic with worry, pleaded with them to keep looking, but the search was in vain. Emma had become another lost soul, another story in the cursed book of the Forgotten Path. The forest remained silent and brooding, a place where the whispers of the damned echoed through the trees. and the shadows waited for their next victim. And the book, now lying forgotten in the old cabin, continued to grow, its pages filled with the stories of those who dared to venture into the darkness and were never seen again.